Today we're going to be talking about loops versus arcs in your video game playthrough, your storyline, and how you can engage players with different characters and different options in your game. So Mike, what is the difference between a loop versus an arc when you're talking about game development?
Yeah, in a game, a loop is something where the player sees some sort of situation, they make an input, and they get an output, they get something out of the game, and then it's a repeatable process that they can consistently do. And a lot of traditional games and a lot of earlier games had lots of loops, as opposed to an arc, where until recently most games were focusing very much on arcs, where there was it was not a repeatable process. There was one arc where the player would do something and get a result out, and that would be it. And you can think kind of like in a video game, where an arc might be the overall plot, the main quest line that can't be repeated, usually because events occur that only occur once, having to do with some sort of storyline.
Sure.
You have a dragon, you defeat the dragon, that's the end. Whereas with a loop, it might be something like, you put in, you have a farm, you harvest your crop, and then the crop regrows and you harvest it, and you use the money from your crops to build more farms. That then you can harvest those, and you get more and more and more farms in a game. And a lot of traditional games were very much loop-based. You can keep playing forever. You can always play another inning of baseball.
Right.
And a lot of arcade games, very much loop-based. The game keeps going. You keep racking up a score. You blow up more Space Invaders, get more points. Blow up more Space Invaders, get more points. And then recently with games, you've had arcs where you play the game and then it's over, and you try to put as much content into your game as possible, make the game have as much playtime as possible, but eventually you win the game. There's not that much more to do because all the enemies are defeated. And then recently, in the newest phase of games
gaming in general,
culture,
seeing a hybrid.
we're seeing a lot of loops, a lot of mobile games, and there's an attempt to combine loops and arcs in a game, because an arc lets you have a big storyline with ups and downs and an end result that's very big. But loops are very, you can keep coming back to them. They get very, very addictive. So trying to combine loops and arcs together. We've had games like Skyrim, where there are a lot of quests where it's, you go out, you defeat the bandit, go back with your treasure, but then there's a big quest line. Trying to make the game as fun and as continuously fun, whereas an arc has big ups and downs, and then there are parts that are less interesting and the game ends. So when you're designing a game, you definitely want to take into consideration having a lot of loops, having behavior that is repeatable, that players can get better at. They learn how to do these things.
That's reliable.
And they have a progress in getting better at these loops, being able to get more and more resources or whatever points out of your game. But also having an arc that allows the player to have a sense of progress and accomplishment in the game, and an emotional tie,
engagement with the story,
to the overall picture of the game. So combining those two things, you want to make sure that you don't focus only on one or the other, unless you're creating a very specialized game.
But,
there are lots of mobile games where it's a very small, and it becomes a fad, because there will always be another loop that somebody will go, I'm going to play this game now. So if you combine them, you have a big game that is comprised of lots of little loops. The game becomes more compelling. People can return to it.
It does. I mean, you have to think of designing a game the same way you're thinking about a TV show or a book series. Obviously, if you're a game designer, or you have a story to tell that's an arc-based game, for instance, like the Batman series, and in one of the games it's leading you along a path that you're eventually going to kill the Joker. And that is where the Joker's going to die at the end of the game. And that is the story. And it's kind of like a book or a movie. It's got a runtime. It's got a certain set of milestones. And then you're going to go through that emotionally. But that's it. Then that game is over. And that's okay. There's nothing bad between those two things. It's what type of game you want to design.
Yeah. And for companies like the company that creates the Arkham Batman games, they're constantly being pushed to make another DLC or another expansion pack, or when's the next game coming
story.
Because after a couple years, people don't play those games as much, which that can be your business model, but then you're constantly creating arcs.
Well, and the longevity of your property, if you're designing that, you certainly can have mini games. Like you think about Red Dead Redemption 2, there is a specific storyline arc to that game. You're following this quest line. It picks up from the first game, but there's tons of mini games, whether that's the shooting galleries or that's the fishing aspect or whatever, or the hunting of a specific beast, that give kind of the flavor to the game. But you know, eventually, if you want to return to the main quest line, it's going to take you down this certain set of steps. And then, like you mentioned, you can't necessarily go back and do those same things again. But you trade that off for your player with the reward of a specific item or meeting a character.
These are games that are and these are some of the most popular games of their time, and they're very, very arc-based, but they have lots of loops in them to keep them compelling, whereas a game like Minecraft is very much a loop-based. You can you mine a block, and then you can place a block. But then there is an arc, because there are certain... there's the Ender Dragon that you have to defeat.
Quests that you're supposed to go on.
So your game might be more heavily based on loops or on arcs, but you want to have both.
Yes.
To make the best possible game, you definitely want to consider having lots of loops in your game and then arcs in your game.
Absolutely.
You want to have both.
Yeah, and I think that makes it a balanced experience for players, that when they know they're coming to that world, there's some things that they can do to harvest resources or like you said, get better at a very specific piece of the game. But then ultimately, since we also love stories, we want to know there's something to come back to that you can pick up kind of where you were at. So I think it's important to have both in to have a successful property.
Yeah, it's like having your dinner and then having your dessert.
Right. Well, thank you so much for tuning back in. This has been the Game Brainz. Remember to subscribe and share our videos below. And until next time, thank you so much.